before we begin, for any of you that were with us last week, you probably realized that we were video bombed at some point. And we had unauthorized entrance into our program, and we immediately had to shut it down. And then we began again on Facebook, didn't we? Continued it on Facebook. That was last week. But these things, we've heard about it on the media, about how people are getting into Zoom rooms and doing all sorts of things. So we did an immediate kind of a shutdown on that. I don't know where they were coming from, within the country, out of the country, all sorts of. There were close to a dozen people that had invaded the room. We changed it a little bit this time, as you know. You came in through a portal, came in through being admitted into the room, and that's basically why we did that this week. And I think that should work very fine. But in the event that something unforeseen happens, realize that's the nature of the game nowadays. So welcome to our live event. Even the big shows are are low tech now. I mean, I saw a little bit of Jimmy Kimmel last night, and it's really, really amazing to watch. He's in his house and somebody else is in their house. I think it was a fellow who plays, what's his name, Jim, who plays Sheldon on the
Big Bang Theory.
The Big Bang Theory. Thank you. He was on last night. He was in his bedroom in his house, and it's all very low tech. This technological era now, since a lot of us are working remotely at home, even the big stars. So we're all part of that same loop, and hopefully someday we'll look back at it with a I wouldn't say a laugh, because it's been a tragedy for so many people, but unfortunately history is written by the survivors, and we'll look back on it and see what we learned and what we experienced. So without further ado, let's experience something in the kitchen, and I'm going to hand it over to Weston. Weston, take it away.
Hey there. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that awesome intro, as always. So welcome, everybody. I think we have a fair number of people. We have Carol here. Hey there, Carol. Denise, we have Glenda, Glazer, maybe, Kay Laser, and Patricia. Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to be discussing a few different things, mainly around snacking and mindful eating. So with so many distractions in today's world, it's really getting ever more difficult to get away from the television, to get away from the computer, the iPad, our cell phones. Some of us that might be more, I guess you could say, fortunate if you're pretty low tech at this point. Maybe you still have a flip phone and you're not glued to your iPhone. I still know some folks like that who still have a flip phone, and I envy those folks. And then if it's not already hard enough already, we now have an ever-evolving news cycle that fills us with fear, fills us with anxiety, fills us with uncertainty about the future. And what's this do to us? You know, it really creates a sense of fight or flight within us at all times, as if in Western society we didn't already have a sense of fight or flight, go, 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 multitask all the time. Now we have this fight or flight of what's going on in the world, with a constant update of death tolls, of this, of that. So it's hard to escape that. And this can in turn, can raise our blood pressure. It can raise our cortisol levels, adrenaline, make your heart feel like it's pumping out of its chest. And this really takes a big toll on our immune system. And I don't think really the media is talking about this as much as they should. The fact that, when we're in this heightened state, it really does decrease our immune system. And at the same time that it decreases the effectiveness of our immune system, other branches of the immune system, they kind of put on their boxing gloves. They get ready to fight, But in terms of this COVID, that's kind of the last thing we want. We don't want our immune system to be so ramped up, because those that suffer the worst from this, that's what's happening, as their immune system's so ramped up and it's not able to come back down. So by putting us in this fight or flight, it's really the last thing we want to do, and really makes us even more prone to illness. And so along with all these physiological changes, we may experience certain cravings for foods. This could be fatty foods, sugary foods, salty foods. And in my opinion, this is kind of an evolutionary response. Typically in history, in a hunter-gatherer society, fat foods was good because fat meant that if you had a lot of fat, you might not encounter food for a week. So let's get the energy while we can. Fat is very energy dense. But in today's society where we're not going outside, we're quarantining ourselves, eating that ice cream might not be the best decision because now we're not exercising, we're not out there, and we have plenty of availability to food. In terms of sugary foods, I always like to say that all bears love honey, as in all living things like glucose. We all love sugar. We are programmed to like sugar. So when that sweet tooth is calling, don't feel guilty. We're only humans. We're only living organisms. Our cells like sugar. And then when it comes to salty foods, even salty foods, when you think of hunter-gatherer populations, you think of Amazonian tribes, they don't go to the grocery store and get salt, right? But we still need salt. When we sweat, we work outside, we still need to replete our calcium, or not our calcium, our sodium and our potassium, our electrolytes. We still need to replete those minerals that are lost while we sweat. And so again, we have an evolutionary response to like salty foods. So don't blame yourself whenever you get these cravings for potato chips, because potato chips, it's all 3 in 1. We have fat, we have simple carbs, and we have salt. 3 things humans love. So when we go to the grocery store and we go for the potato chips, that is why, those food
3 essential nutrients, right?
Pardon?
The 3 essential nutrients.
Yeah. It's almost like we're own food groups in the Western diet is salt, simple carbs, and processed fats, unfortunately, which is what's making us so darn sick. That's why, unfortunately, in America, we're suffering so much more from COVID, is because so many people are sick chronically. It may not manifest as acute disease, but when we're walking around with lots of excess body weight, high blood sugar levels, high cholesterol levels, pair that with a decreased amount of antioxidant-rich foods, fruits and vegetables, we now have a combination of things that causes our body to be chronically ill. Think about it like a car that the fuel filter is clogged up, the spark plugs are bad, your oil hasn't been changed in 10,000 miles, and your coolant's leaking. Your car might run, but does it run well? No. And what happens when that coolant hose finally blows? What happens when that clot in your bloodstream finally throws off and goes into the aorta? That's a heart attack. So it's these little steps of chronic illness that then lead to more catastrophic disease. So that's why I'm such an advocate of just taking care of your body every single day and really looking at disease in a different point of view. As Westerners, we tend to look at it as an acute disease and not a chronic illness that builds up over time that manifests as different symptoms. And these symptoms manifest differently in different individuals.
Interesting.
So that's why treating, pardon, Joe?
I say it's interesting you used a car analogy. I used to use it with my students too. And there are a lot of things like our genetics we can't control, we can't control, again, if an asteroid's going to hit us as we're walking down the street. Certain things we can't control, but we can maximize our possibilities, and I think that's what you're saying, for as healthy an existence while we're here as possible by putting the right kind of fuel in the engine.
Exactly, Joe. And that's why I get so passionate about food, because I know the power of food. I know the power of living the maximal amount with our loved ones, with our family, with our friends. I see folks that are in their 70s that have taken care of themselves and they're still able to go for hikes. They're still able to go for runs, walk around the property if they have a large acreage.
You
And
know
people
people,
that are,
you know people in their 70s?
I do, Joe. I don't know. There may be
Not
some.
that I do.
um, and I also see folks in their 50s that have trouble just walking because of chronic illness from obesity and diabetes. And the power of 20 years, you know, it makes me so sad when I hear folks that are 60 saying, you know, I've lost hope that I'll ever be able to go for a walk around the block again. I've lost hope that I can reverse my diabetes or reverse my cardiovascular disease and live a fulfilling life. And it makes me sad because I know the power of food. I know the power of lifestyle changes and what that can do in people's lives and how much better we can feel. You know, and say you can get squeeze another 20 years or even another 10 or 5 years of good life. You know, that's a really special thing to do just through lifestyle and food changes. And so, you know, that all manifested from talking about this pandemic, but I think this really puts into light the importance of taking care of our bodies, the importance of taking care of ourselves. And, you know, this kind of goes into mindful eating, especially while we're at home. You know, so many of us are at home for a large amount of the day now. Our routines are kind of messed up. For those that maybe work from home, work and meals and your own personal time are now all kind of combined into one. Routines are thrown off. So maybe we're skipping lunch, skipping breakfast, and then we get hungry at noon or 3 o'clock, say, and we're starving because we haven't eaten all day because our routines are thrown off. So that's why I really just had this calling to do a class today on snacking, healthy snacking, and mindful eating, because with that, it soothes not only our physical body, but hopefully our mind and our emotions as well, which is ever more important. And I think mainstream medicine is realizing the benefit of spiritual daily practices, spiritual or just and emotional practices that fill us up at our core, you know. And sometimes mindless eating, sometimes that comes from a void inside, you know, or something inside that is digging at us, and we go to food. So with that all aside, what we're going to learn today is we're going to learn 3 recipes. We're going to learn how to make yogurt parfaits today. We're going to learn how to make hummus, homemade hummus today. And then for our final finale, we're going to be doing peanut butter banana ice cream. So I personally make this several times a week. It's 2 simple ingredients, bananas and peanut butter. You could use almond butter and a splash of milk of your choice. We're going to be using some oat milk today, but any kind of beverage of your choice. When I go to the grocery store, I have noticed the ice cream aisle is wiped out. And the middle aisles, when you go down the middle of the aisles, I noticed that they're bare. And as nutritionists, we usually say, you know, shop around the outer perimeter of the store, and that's where you'll find your unprocessed foods at. Well, that outer perimeter is actually pretty well stocked. What's out is the processed foods, which also tells me that many more people are eating processed food and eating it like snacks. Because that's what we do when we eat processed food, is we snack on it. So today we're going to learn about these 3 recipes. So I kind of try to cover all the bases. So I have a sweet, I have, you know, the banana ice cream savory recipe, which is the hummus. And then the parfait is just an all around, just good recipe. It tends to be more on the sweeter side, but without any added sugar. So, and then we're going to finalize that with some mindful eating tips at the end. So those should be the goals today for everybody. So to get started, we're going to actually start with our savory, which is our hummus. So how many of you guys have made hummus at the house before? So I see 1 hand. All right, excellent, Carol. Oh, and Patricia, awesome. So hopefully you also enjoy this recipe, and there's many ways to do it. We're gonna make it a simple hummus today, so just a classic lemon and garlic. It's also really nice to add cilantro or parsley, or dill is another good addition. And roasted red pepper is also a really good addition to this. So just to give you some other tips, as well as mint. I've had it with mint, and that adds a nice touch to it as well. So without further ado, let's get started on this hummus. So I'm going to be using a food processor today. So this is just a food processor. I think I actually picked this up at a community aid for like 10 bucks. So those who don't have a food processor, they can be picked up for pretty good prices used. Or new, you can pick them up for a good price as well. So I'm putting on just normal blade into here. They come with different attachments. So the first thing I will add is 1 can of chickpeas. Let's see, there we go. So if you're gonna make your own chickpeas from scratch, it'll be about 2 cups. This is a 15-ounce can. So I drained most of the juice out, but I left just a little bit in there. The next thing we will add is tahini. So tahini is ground sesame seeds, is what it is. So it kind of looks like a peanut butter, but it's not. So we're gonna add a 1/3 cup of tahini. And sesame seeds are actually a very rich source of plant calcium. And they also contain very little oxalates, which would absorb that plant calcium and prevent it from being absorbed. So tahini is actually a great source of available calcium for those who don't do dairy. All right, next thing we will add is a little olive oil. So we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of olive oil to this. All right. Next thing we will add is the juice of 1 lemon. You can also use the juice that comes out of like the bottled lemons, but I find that nothing really compares to fresh lemon juice. But in a pinch, the lemon juice in a bottle works all right. And I'm just putting this through a strainer so the seeds don't end up in here. And so you can also purchase hummus in the store, but for those that have made their own, know that the store hummus cannot compare 1 bit to homemade hummus. It just doesn't have the same taste. And additionally, hummus in the store is typically made with sunflower oil, soybean oil, those polyunsaturated fats that tend to increase inflammation. As opposed to the monounsaturated found in olive oil. They're very heart healthy, and they've actually been shown to lower LDL. So those that suffer from, high LDL cholesterol, olive oil may. All right, next thing we will add. So just to review, we've added our chickpeas.
A question about
Joe?
Question about that oil.
Yeah.
Why do you think that manufacturers don't use olive oil as much? Does it not travel well? Is it not as stable on the shelf as some of the other oils?
That is one reason it's not as stable, and it's not as cheap. So you got to think, our tax dollars go to subsidizing corn and soybean. It goes to these agribusinesses that are already multi-billion-dollar agribusinesses, and we pay to grow soy and grow corn. So they're cheap. Corn oil, soybean oil It's extremely cheap. Same with the trans fats, the hydrogenated oils, Joe, that are often found in peanut butter. They are very shelf stable and cheap. So food manufacturers typically use that, and food manufacturers are not really out for our health like most businesses. They're out for what, Joe?
The dollar.
The bottom line, exactly. So if they can find a way to manufacture a food for cheaper, they will. And then add in other preservatives, other flavors to make it taste like olive oil. You know, but we will talk about in our mindful eating practices today about really whenever we eat, looking into what went into all these ingredients. Where did the food come from? So this kind of goes in with that mindful eating practice of knowing all the ingredients that are going into here. So next, with that in mind, we're going to add 2 cloves of garlic. Since this is going to the food processor, I'm just going to do like a rough chop. I'm not going to go crazy at mincing it.
That was crazy by my standard.
Next thing we're going to add is a half teaspoon of salt. And last but not least, this is an option, but I do enjoy it, is a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin. Anyone that's joined me thus far in these knows that cumin is one of my favorite spices. I use it in practically everything. And many cultures around the world use it. In India, they use it. In North Africa, the Middle East, even Cajun cuisine contains a lot of cumin. The Middle Eastern or Mediterranean countries do cumin. So it's a very widely used spice, and for good reason too. So from here, we're gonna blend, and I'm gonna turn off my sound so I don't blast everyone out with the sound of a blender. All right.
I should have brought my harmonica.
So for those wondering what I was adding there, it was just water. As I blend it and process it, I just kind of go by eye. If it looks really clumpy, I'll add up to a 1/4 cup of water typically. But judge it with your eye. If it still looks clumpy, add a little bit more. I'll stir it up. And I'm gonna pulse it a few times from here.
So it's got to be thick enough to fit on those healthy potato chips and not fall off.
Yeah. Or we're gonna talk about some other things we can dip in it as well.
Okay, okay. Like we're getting ready for a Super Bowl.
All right, take a little taste of this.
Weston,
Yeah.
I have a recipe for carrot hummus, which is quite similar to this, but you do add raw carrots to it as well, which is, I really like that.
That sounds great too. Yes, that's another good idea. And that adds some more vitamin A, which is that's another one of those antioxidants.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a great choice. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Patricia. So now that we have this is done, it tastes phenomenal. So we'll put this in a little bowl. All right, you'll never be able to get quite all of it out, so at a certain point, I say that is good enough. So from here, what we'll do is I'm just going to chop up a little bit of cilantro. If you're one of those that has the gene where you do not like cilantro, parsley also works well. So I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of cilantro as a garnish. Sprinkle a little bit of paprika for color. And just a little bit of olive oil just to add a bit more creaminess. So Joe, this is something we could add to really, instead of doing potato chips, is just like Patricia said, a carrot. And so actually how I slice a carrot for this is kind of like how it goes into Asian food, is I slice it at an angle. And you get these kind of chips, like a little carrot chip.
Impressive.
You can put that in there. Another option I like is a cucumber. So again, there's really no calories in these, and really all your chip is a carrier for the hummus. Let's admit it. With that little extra salt on that chip too, but the carrot and the cucumber provide the crunch that the chip provides while still acting as a carrier for the hummus.
I guess you could put those chips inside of a food dehydrator or whatever as well.
Ooh, that would be good too, Joe.
Real crunchy, yeah.
So you can add some cucumbers into there. Another one is just a simple bell pepper. Put it into some thicker julienne slices, so not extremely thin. You know, something like that. And now you have this beautiful little platter, which not only is going to taste delicious, but as we're going to talk about later in mindful eating, this tends to satisfy our eye hunger. So, you know, we've always, as the saying goes, our eyes are sometimes bigger than our stomach. That's actually a kind of hunger, is eye hunger. We see something, we like the way it looks, and it helps satisfy our overall hunger. So this is a great way to just have a snack as you're hopefully not watching TV as we're snacking, but inevitably we always do. So for you and your loved one, or even yourself, to dig into this. So, as I promised, we're going to do something else, and that is going to be a parfait. So I'm going to flip over my cutting board because I don't want my apples to taste like garlic, which has happened to me before, where I cut up garlic on the same cutting board as I cut up my apples. I bite into my apple and I say, that's a weird tasting apple. So just a word of caution out there, anytime you cut up a garlic and then proceed to cut up something sweet. Sometimes not the best. So I'm gonna get out my yogurt out of the fridge. All right, so as for those who don't know, a parfait is made from yogurt. But though, unlike those that are available at McDonald's and Subway that are filled with, the ones at McDonald's are actually filled with tons of added sugars. There's cornstarch in the yogurt at McDonald's, so those that are trying to avoid corn, it's hidden in there in yogurt. I don't know why cornstarch is in yogurt, but McDonald's puts it in there. They also put in natural and artificial flavors. Again, I'm not sure why that's in yogurt, as well as preservatives. And they also put in barley malt extract into McDonald's Parfait, which for those that don't know, that's derived from gluten. So those that are trying to follow a gluten-free diet, you get a Parfait from McDonald's thinking, it's a Parfait, there's no gluten. Well, it's hiding in there because for some reason McDonald's decided to put that stuff in there. But nonetheless, today we'll be using, this is my preferred yogurt. Let's see. It's called Nancy's Probiotic Whole Milk Yogurt. So this actually has dedicated strains in it. So proven strains that have been shown to be beneficial for our immune system and for our guts. So in Western society, our westernized diets actually, they kind of kill off our microbiome, which our microbiome, we've evolved with these commensal bacteria in our guts. But in this day and age of, antibiotics and bacteria are bad, kill all bacteria, actually many of the bacteria and microorganisms are beneficial and have evolved with humans and with the human gut. So by wiping them out, we are actually causing so much dysfunction in our body. We are still discovering it each and every day. There's new articles put out about the microbiome. Another one that is good, the Nancy's is available at Wegmans. That's the only place I've been able to find it around here. Maybe Healthy Grocer in Mechanicsburg. This one is available at Giant, right in Walnut Bottom, my little local Giant. So it's called Stonyfield Organic Probiotic Yogurt. That's the key word to look for, is probiotic. And when I go in the back of this, one of the bacteria is called Bifidobacterium BB12. And so those numbers and letters, they signify a very specific strain of bacteria that shows to be beneficial. So just like how a dog, it's one species with hundreds of different dogs, right? And you wouldn't employ a Chihuahua to do the same thing you'd have a German Shepherd do, right? It's the same thing with a bacteria. It may be one species, but a bunch of different strains in there. So it may be confusing, but when you're shopping for yogurts, look for those probiotic specific yogurts. So without further ado, we're gonna fill up our cup right here. This is just a little 10-ounce glass maybe. About halfway full of yogurt. So I'd say it's probably about 5 to 6 ounces of yogurt.
While you're doing that, can I ask a question about the fact that what if you are lactose intolerant?
Yes, that's a great question. So the bacteria in yogurt, they're often lactobacillus, which means they digest lactose, right? Which is why it's a fermented milk, because they fermented it into this yogurt, consumed most of the sugars. So in this, there's 8 grams of lactose in this amount to start. And then on top of that, what actually happens, Patricia, is when we consume these bacteria, we destroy some of those bacteria in our stomachs. However, the lactase, which is the enzyme to break down lactose, interestingly, it actually survives into our intestine, that enzyme, and helps digest the lactose that's present in yogurt. I'm going to unmute you, Patricia.
Yeah. Well, so if it doesn't matter that, like, I am always looking for, like at Giant, they do have, Yoplait does have a lactose-free yogurt. And then, of course, there's soy and coconut milk and those kinds of other yogurts. But most all of them are flavored.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And if you want plain,
How do you react all right to yogurt?
Oh yeah, I've been eating it for many, many years, but in the past maybe 5 years, I've been having problems with digesting, milk products.
Okay, is it all milk products or just yogurts?
No, it's like milk. If I put milk in my tea or coffee,
Okay.
that too.
So I could see that, but I would maybe try just a normal yogurt.
Right.
Particularly, Giant, like I said,
Stonyfield, yeah.
yeah, the Stonyfield organic. This has 8 grams of sugar, but like I said, most of that sugar, the enzymes present naturally in the bacteria should be able to break that down enough so you don't have an intolerance reaction.
Right.
Give it a whirl. Every body will react differently. But as a general rule of thumb, those with lactose intolerance, now that is different from a dairy allergy.
Yeah.
A dairy allergy was the actual proteins in the dairy. But if it's a lactose, try out yogurt and see how your body reacts.
Well, because I really want to find unflavored, and so, okay, thank you.
Give that a whirl, and then next week you can give us an update.
Okay,
Right?
if I go to the store between now and then.
Yeah, there we go. All right, but great question, Patricia. I'm sure others would have that same question. So, next thing we're going to add into here, just add a little sweetness, is an apple. I'm going to slice up an apple really small into little bits. This is a Fuji apple. Fujis are actually one of my favorite apples. They're sweet, lots of crunch, and they're available at the local markets right now, right from Gardner's, Pennsylvania. So I'm going to slice these up. Little tiny pieces, as you guys can see. Put that on top of there. Just like so. So I just use a little slice of an apple. See, it's about half, not even. So next thing we'll add on top of that is a little walnuts. So walnuts contain really, really beneficial fats called omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, and they also help with our cholesterol too. So
Is that the same omega as in the olive oil?
So the olive oils contain something called monounsaturated fats, but they're another kind of fat. It basically means that, this might get into too much scientific jargon, but fats are these really long chains of carbons, really long chains, kind of like oil, like motor oil. I mean, it still is derived from it's oil, and a monounsaturated means it has one place where there's a double bond at. Omega-3 means there's 3 places where there's double bonds at. So those are the differences, and they have different reactions in our body. For those that joined last week, I mentioned how food compounds all have different, sorry, I was just reading. They all have different functions in our bodies. So different fats will do different things to our DNA. Next thing we're going to add on top of that, a little ground flaxseed. Flaxseed is really rich in omega-3s. It's also really rich in soluble fiber. So soluble fiber will help, not only will it help with constipation, but it can also, for those experiencing more of a diarrhea, it can help bind up your stool and kind of form it into a gel, and so that way it's not loose.
This is
Maybe
a
TMI for some.
family program.
Pardon?
This is a family program.
Oh yeah, and believe me, I've had kids classes. They love talking about this, Joe. If a little boy can have an excuse to talk about poo, they will. Believe me. We're gonna add a little ground flaxseed to that. a little bit of chia seed. So again, a rich source of omega-3s. It adds a little crunch into there too. I'll add just a little spoonful of this. Another one I'm going to add that I really, really enjoy is some ground cardamom. So cardamom's typically used in Indian cooking and Middle Eastern cooking. It's similar to cinnamon, but not exactly. But it just has really nice flavor. You don't want to use too much of it. I'm just going to use about a quarter teaspoon in this, maybe. And then your little fruit parfait is finished. And then last but not least, we are going to make our banana ice cream. But Joe has a little word for you just for a quick minute before we start. I'm going to go wash a dish so I can make this banana ice cream. So off to you, Joe.
Well, I got a couple of words, guys, but one of the things I was thinking of is, I guess chia seeds are for more than just making a chia pet. That was an interesting little side point. Reminds me of those old commercials with the chia pets. I guess they use those seeds for that. The other thing I was going to mention is about our farm stand distribution is a good indication of how things are increasing and how we're serving the community. Normally at a farm stand distribution, we would serve about 160 family units. And today is Wednesday. Yesterday, we served 220. So that gives you an idea of the increase since this has all begun. And farm stand is a good indication too, because farm stand, we, unlike distribution where you have to go through the intake and you have to be, vetted so that you're in the 150% or less of the poverty index, federal government. But unlike that farm stand, everybody is welcome. So that catches a lot of people who are recently unemployed and need some extra help as well. So we've seen a rise of about 60 people. And we do that twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I remember when Weston was talking about sugar, reminded me, in another life, I taught nurse aid training at Employment Skills Center. And sugar was something that I talked about a lot too. So I'm as passionate about that as Weston is, I think. And one of the things that was interesting fact about sugar is that sugar, particularly processed sugar, was not known in the world, in the Western world, until Columbus discovered America in 1492. When it came to the Caribbean islands, they really started to process sugar and send that back to Europe. And they would have sugar with the Queen's tea. It was one of the first uses of sugar in the old world. And sugar became like a drug amongst fighting gangs, really, in those days, pirates and all that. Sugar was really a drug because it was such a valuable commodity. What's happening now is we're not fighting over sugar anymore. It's very cheap, but it is a drug. It remains to be a drug, and it's something that is very addictive. So I thought about that as well as Weston was speaking. And finally, one other thing I wanted to mention to you is I have not had any pictures from any of you as to some of your preparations, but I welcome to see some of your pictures of some of the foods that you prepare. And I can leave it wide open if you have something that you are preparing this coming week or have prepared that you've taken a picture of that you believe to be healthy. Okay, so let's keep to the theme of healthy. Please share that with us and send a photo of that or a photo of your family group consuming it or however you want to do it, and send it to me at jkloza, like you see on the screen, at projectsharepa.org. And we'd love to see what's going on remotely with you all as far as healthy cooking from your point of view. Over to you, Weston.
All right, thanks, Joe. And I will actually have to get you over a photo because Carol actually sent me over a photo last week of the chickpea stew we made.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
I'll have to shoot that over to you via text, Joe.
Excellent.
So thank you again, Carol, for shooting that over.
All right, Carol's trying to say something. You want to unmute her there?
I'm trying to unmute her. Are you
Let me
able
see
to
if
do
I
it?
can do that.
Oh, wait.
There.
There you go,
Oh,
Carol.
Carol.
I could unmute myself. The only thing was it was just a picture of the dish. It wasn't a picture of anybody eating it.
Oh, that's
That's
okay.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep, I'll shoot that over and we'll get that posted.
We'll virtually consume it.
Well, thanks again, Carol.
Sure.
All right, so like I promised, we're going to be making some banana ice cream. So this is one of my favorite dishes. My partner and I make it several times a week, actually. We're guilty of sometimes making it 3 times a week or 4 times a week, which I guess is half of the days of the week, but that's okay because all it is frozen bananas. So these are 2 bananas. I froze them this morning. So 2 bananas chopped up, frozen for at least 2 hours. They get to the right consistency. So we're gonna put these bananas in here. Oh, let me get my blade in there first. Perfect. All right. So we'll get our bananas in there. Excellent. All right. Next thing we're gonna add is, can everyone see that? There we go. Peanut butter. And what I'm also going to use is a little bit of almond butter, if anyone can see that with the lighting. So peanut butter, I love peanut butter, but almonds, they contain the same fats that olive oil contains. So they are a true nut as opposed to peanuts are actually a legume. So I'm going to use a half and half. Just because almond butter is so darn expensive, I can't justify doing it several times a week for ice cream. But to make myself feel like it's a little healthier, I do use just a little bit of almond butter. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So we're going to do a 1/4 cup total of nut butter. And I have mentioned this in other episodes, but if you can, go for peanut butter or nut butter with no extra added oils. So if you can, go for where it just says peanuts, and sometimes it might say a little salt, you know, but try to go for ones that contain no added sugars, no added oils. And I actually, like you can see here, this is actually Nature's Promise. I don't work for Giant, I don't consult for Giant, but that's where I shop. And this is a great price for the Nature's Promise organic nut butter. They're not organic. One is, the almond butter is not, but they are far cheaper than the brand names and just as good. So we will do this 1/4 of butter in here. There's a little bit left in there, but you can never get it all out. So I'll either save that for me to lick out later or my dog to lick out, one of the two. All right, so the next thing we're gonna add in here is just a splash of milk of your choice. You can use real milk, you can use almond milk, oat milk, whatever you'd like. Just a splash. And last but not least is a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon. And these are all optional. You could just do it with nut butter and peanut or bananas, but I do like the taste of a little cinnamon in there. And that cardamom is also a great addition. One last thing, this is again just a little luxury item, but I get it at TJ Maxx. When we go back to normal again, when TJ Maxx is open, I get these Cacao Nibs really cheap there. Cacao Nibs, really high in antioxidants, and they're really, really good for you. And add a little chocolatey crunch to your ice cream. So I'm gonna add maybe about a tablespoon or so. And I'm gonna mute myself so I don't blast everyone's ears with food processor.
While he's muting, listen to an interesting program today on WITF 89.5 FM with Scott Lamar at 9 o'clock. I think it'll be repeated, I believe it's 7 o'clock, I'm not sure. And Smart Talk is the name of the program. And it was about food situation in the United States today and Pennsylvania. There was a couple of officials from the state. They were talking about some of the shortages in certain foods, were potential shortages, things like that. And about the food distribution in general, especially during this crisis. So some of you that are interested in that might find that program interesting. That's Scott Lamar. I believe it's at 7 o'clock on WITF radio.
So our banana ice cream is finished. It's a bit lumpy, but it just has kind of little chunks of banana in it, which I actually like, little biting of little chunks of banana. And I know my partner will be very happy that there's banana ice cream midday. I'm sure she's waiting upstairs right now for this to finish so she can enjoy it after this. Not many times do I make banana ice cream midday, so this is a rarity. But when it comes down to it, it's bananas and nut butter. So it's kind of like having a treat, but not feeling guilty about it because there is no added sugar. So here we are. And there we are. My partner just showed up in the kitchen. I think she heard it was finished. So there we have our three items. We have our savory, our breakfast-like snack, and then more of a sweet tooth with our ice cream. So three really yummy things to have that you don't have to feel guilty about. So if anybody wants to stick around, I have just a few tips about mindful eating. Would anyone be interested in those? Excellent, cool. So those that are still on would be interested. So kind of turning back around to where I was starting, sometimes
I'm gonna say goodbye because I have to do a work meeting in a few minutes.
Cool.
So all the best, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Thank you, man.
All right, guys. So these are just some tips about mindful eating. And you know, mindfulness, it's kind of one of those Eastern practices that may be looked at as a little woo-woo, a little crazy. But when it comes down to it, Americans and Westerners in general, we spend a majority of our lives stuck in our heads, right? We spend it thinking about the past. We spend it worrying about the future. But how much of it are we actually present in the moment? You know, as one of the great teachers has said, I'm sure you guys will know, Jesus, live in the world, but not of it. You know, be present, but don't wrap yourself up in it, you know, because everything will be okay. You know, everything will be okay. And that kind of goes hand in hand with mindfulness and being in the moment, as living in this world, being in the moment, but not letting ourselves get so consumed with it. And that I think is not more true than right now with all this craze in the media, and not saying that it's not merited. However, it can really take a hold of our minds. So we can carry these mindful practices out of when we live into our new normal once we all can come out of quarantine, but especially right now. So the first thing I want to say when it comes to mindful eating is to tune in with our emotions before we eat. You know, are we eating out of anxiety? Are we eating because we're angry? Are we eating because we're depressed? A lot of folks, when we feel depressed, some folks go right for food. Myself, when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling anxiety or overwhelmed, I will choose to not eat, you know, which is also not good. But some folks will go to food. Are we hangry because we haven't eaten all day? For those that have heard that term hangry, when we hungry and angry all at the same time. If this is the case, we may be craving quick sugar. You know, I know if I skip breakfast, I skip lunch. Even nutritionists, we still do that sometimes because we're all human, right? I'll crave something really sweet. I'll crave a piece of candy or some chocolate bar, but it comes down to it, my blood sugar's low. And so my cells are saying, I want sugar now. Give me sugar now, Weston. But when I step back and look and I think about that, I don't stop on the way home in Giant and get a Cliff Bar. Even though Cliff Bars are promoted as a health food, they're loaded with sugar. So it's my version of a Snickers bar. And so when I tune in with that and I say, no, Weston, just wait till you get home and make a real dinner, you know, because when we get into that process, we'll snack on something else, and all of a sudden we skip dinner. So tune in with that. Another one is, what hunger are we experiencing? So there's different types of hunger, 7 different types of hunger. And this is actually taken from a book called Mindful Eating, written from Jan Bays, B-A-Y-S, I believe. And she's actually an MD out of California. Here we go. Mindful Eating. It's a really good book. And so she discusses eye hunger as one. So the classic, our eyes are bigger than our stomachs. You know, we see something and we want it. Another one is nose hunger, right? So how about in town? You know, they have a fan that pumps out the smell of fries and burgers. So when you're passing by Pitt Street, you say, man, that smells really good. I didn't want a burger. I don't even like burgers, but I kind of want to go into Cafe Bruges. You know, that's a good marketing tactic for Cafe Bruges. There's mouth hunger. So I really think of mouth hunger as, you know, mindless eating, right? Is, you know, we're eating some pasta with a homemade sauce. We take the first bite or two, we savor that. We say, wow, that is really good. I feel so satisfied. We start talking with somebody, we start watching TV. By the time we know it, we're finished with our pasta. We don't remember eating our pasta. And your mouth tells you, your taste buds say, hey, I got cheated. I didn't get that whole bowl of pasta, you know, because our stomach doesn't have taste buds. So that's mouth hunger, you know, so mindful eating practices can really satiate your taste buds, right? And maybe closing your eyes when you eat. If you've ever noticed that, whenever we tune out one sense, we often enhance another. So by closing our eyes, our minds are no longer processing visual cues, but now just tuning in to our taste buds, right? Another hunger would be stomach hunger. So this would be like hunger pangs, you know, when our stomach's grumbling, sometimes it feels like it's grinding food that's not even there. And interestingly enough, I compare it to my dog, you know, because my dog is very well trained. 8 o'clock comes around, he wakes me up and goes to his food dish. He knows 8 o'clock is breakfast, and 6 o'clock at night is dinner. And if I don't feed him, he wakes me up, he begs, he runs around the house like a crazy man. Same with our stomachs. You know, our stomachs get used to eating at 7, at noon, at 6, or whenever your dinner time is. But are we actually hungry? You know, and we may be, but tune into that. Say we've eaten in the morning at 10 o'clock, and at noon, we usually eat lunch, our stomach might start growling, even though we don't actually need food. So this really goes towards those that tend to overeat, is to really getting in tune with your stomach. And are we actually hungry, or is my stomach like a dog and saying, hey, Patricia, eat, eat. I eat at 12 o'clock every single day. Another type of hunger is cellular hunger. So we might be thinking, what the heck is cellular hunger? So a great example is actually in the winter and summer. And when I told my partner this, she was very happy because it made her feel like it's just a part of us being human. You know, in the wintertime, we tend to gain a few pounds. In the summertime, we tend to lose a few pounds. It's a natural cycle of our weight, because in the wintertime, before we were able to press a button and change the heat and turn it up to 70 degrees, we had to increase the insulation of our bodies during the wintertime, right? Before we had HVAC systems, the natural way to keep warm was to put on a few pounds in the wintertime, and that makes us survive through the winter. And that's at a genetic cellular level. In the summertime, you know, fat is insulation. It will make us hotter. So in the summertime, we tend to lose a few pounds because our body says, you know, how about we lose a few pounds this point of the year? I want to be a little cooler. Another one that's really, really interesting, and I learned about this during my undergrad, was there's some condition called pica, P-I-C-A. And it actually is very abundant in the southern US and very poor communities, where pregnant women will actually eat clay and dirt. And for the longest time, scientists thought, why the heck are these women eating clay and dirt? We went to test that clay and dirt, and what's it rich in? Iron. These pregnant women that can't afford multivitamins, their cells were telling them, you need iron, and somehow we knew to go to clay and eat. Very interesting. It really makes us question about how much our body knows when we tune into our body. It's like a deer. A deer doesn't overeat. You know, it eats until it's full and stops. But as humans, we don't quite have that capability until we really tune in with that. Another kind of hunger is mind hunger. So this really goes into, you know, what we think we're supposed to have. So I go to athletes, for instance. I have a coworker who has a son who's in wrestling. He's in middle school, elementary school, and he feels that he has to have protein at every single meal. He eats beef jerky like there's no tomorrow, you know, because he thinks that he needs protein to be strong, so all he eats is protein. You know, it's kind of that mindset of I'm hungry for protein because everyone says I need protein. And the last, but I think it's one of the most important, is actually heart hunger. And so that goes with, you know, when we're depressed. Say we have a comfort food that we had when we were a small kid, you know, and smelling this, say chicken pot pie, you know, it makes us think of rolling out noodles with our grandmother and cooking something from scratch. Or, you know, it's amazing that a smell of a food can take us back and make us feel like we're right there, you know. And so for a lot of us, some of us eat certain foods to fill a void or to satiate a memory that we have of a loved one. Or like I said, if we're depressed, we might eat because it makes us feel good, right? And so really before we eat, tune into what kind of hunger are we experiencing right now? Is it eye hunger? Is it nose? Is it mouth? Stomach? Is it wintertime and we have a craving for ice cream because we think we need to have something very nutrient or energy dense, but yet we're watching the teenager shovel snow in her driveway as we then go to the store in her heated car, right? It's very different from several hundred years ago when you really did need an insulation during the wintertime, right? Because you're in a drafty old house heated with a coal stove that kept one room hot. So another mindful tip is before turning to a snack, have something to drink, right? Sometimes we don't know the difference between thirst or hunger. Am I feeling thirst? Am I feeling hunger? So before you go directly to a snack, have something to drink first, some tea, some water. And then after that, say, am I still hungry? You know, that's a really good practice. Another one that I think we're all guilty of, even those that teach mindful eating, is put down devices while we eat. As much as we think we can multitask and watch the news or read while we're eating, we can't. You know, your brain has to focus on one thing at a time. As Westerners, we like to think we can multitask, but I think science is now showing we don't function at our best. And so when we work and eat, research has actually shown that afterwards you will not feel as full and you'll tend to consume more calories if we eat and work at the same time, or eat and watch TV, you know, whatever is taking up mind energy. So when we eat, try and just eat. You know, I think it's very habitual now to eat and watch TV. I think that's what most families do, is eat and watch TV. Back when I was a kid, even we had a TV in the dining room, although back then it was one of those little 10-inch TVs. You know, I think most people now have bigger TVs in the house, but this was back in the days of dial-up and the TVs that weighed 100 pounds. So another great one is to serve out your portions, not eat right from the bag, right? Or right from the box. And that's, sometimes when we eat right from a bag, what's the cue to stop eating? Is when the bag is empty or the box is empty. So if we eat from, say, a bowl, put the pretzels in a bowl first, or put some chips in a bowl, or crackers in a bowl, whatever you're snacking on. And then when you're done with that bowl, you can really listen to yourself and say, do I really want more? Do I really want more? And even if you do want more, but you know, one more barrier to getting more things, you know, to eating more. And I'm gonna unmute everybody just in case anyone has any questions.
I just wanted to ask the author's name of the book again, Mindful Eating.
So it is Jan, as in Jan,
Bays.
and then Bays.
Okay. Okay, right. And what about, you know, I'm a cookie monster, and it's very hard for me to resist a cookie, say like about now in the afternoon. And so this gives me some, I do know about drinking some water when you think you're hungry, because often that does, then you figure, oh, I don't need that cookie. But I do still have a hard time resisting them when they're around. And I have nearby grandchildren who always count on me for providing some. So.
So you can't just not have cookies around then.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. That's torture, isn't it?
Yes. Right. But thank you for this, because it is, you know, it's. I loved your recipes. Are you going to post those too, or not post them, but they'll be available for us to copy then? Correct.
They will be on our Facebook, and even if you don't have Facebook, you can still access Project Shares because we're public.
Right.
So I personally don't have Facebook, but I can still log on and look at her posts.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's good news for those without social media.
Oh, also, Weston, is there nobody's really talking anything about Lunch and Learn at this point, are they?
We're gonna still do Lunch and Learn, but it's gonna be to go, so it's gonna look a little different. But we'll release more info as it comes.
I mean, because you still need people to help cook and stuff like that for that.
Yes, we'll be assembling different kinds of items though. So
Okay.
we will keep you updated on that, Patricia.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. All right. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. So with eating a meal, and start with smaller portions, another way is to pick a smaller plate. So as humans, we want to fill up, we see a plate. If it's empty, our mind says, hey, that's empty. It's not supposed to be empty. So instead of a 10-inch plate, go for a smaller plate, because plates have gotten bigger over the years, right? I know I have plates that I got actually from Joe that are probably as old as he is, maybe, or I'll say as young as he is. And they're pretty small dinner plates compared to dinner plates you'll find today.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see that. Another tip is to take a few breaths before your meal. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but to think about the ingredients that went into the food. And inherently, when we do that, we'll tend to consume less processed foods. Because when we think about what's in there, we'll say, that is really just sugar, white flour, and butter. What's that going to do in my body? And then it might dissuade you from eating as many cookies, or whatever it may be. For me, it's pretzels, Thankfully, since I don't do gluten, it kind of eliminates a lot of foods for me inherently. But the gluten-free pretzels are very crunchy and crispy and good, and I just don't even have them in the house. Is one thing. That's how I do it. I just don't even have it. But it's harder for you, Patricia, because your kids demand cookies. So
They don't demand them, but they sort of expect them.
So think about, how much processing did it overgo? Who picked it? How is it treated? So this really even goes into eating locally. I purchase most of my meat through local sources. So when I think about that, I can think about, Daniel Shirk's face that I bought it from the farmer's market. I can think of his son and think, wow, his son is now supported and can eat because I supported Dan, and it all has positive associations with me, as opposed to, say, eating chicken that I know may have lived a very tortured life, may have not been raised in the best conditions. And even when we think about these things, inherently, it may make you change how you eat just from doing that, and the quality of things we put in our bodies. Another one is try to chew. Now, this may sound like a lot. 3 times before swallowing. Now, this goes for something more like steak or something really hearty, but obviously oatmeal. I've tried to chew oatmeal 30 times. It's at what you get to 15 bites, 10 bites, it's made of nothing anymore. So, take that with a grain of salt, but, chew until it's into mush. You don't want to be swallowing whole pieces of meat, because once it gets to your stomach doesn't have teeth to chew it up. Sometimes as much as we chew in our mouth is how much it's accessible to our bodies, if that makes sense. This is a great one, is put down your utensil and take breaks between bites. So I notice I do this all the time myself, is I will eat and not take a breath, especially when we're hungry. We'll eat and eat and eat, and then we finish a meal in 5 minutes. Technically a meal should take 20 minutes. It takes 20 minutes for your brain and your gut to talk to each other and say, hey brain, I'm full, or hey stomach, you're full. That sends a signal back up to your brain that says, stop eating. It's one of the reasons we think maybe the French aren't overweight and suffer from the same health problems, even though they eat butter and cheese and bread and everything that Americans say not to eat. But the French take their time eating. They look at it as really a whole portion of their day goes out to eating, right? So it may have a bigger impact than we think on your metabolic profile. you know, and how fast you digest things, where fat is deposited at, just by taking some breaths. And one of the last things that I think many will relate to is to resign from the clean plate club, right?
We
I
were
was
brought up
raised
with
on the
that.
Clean Plate Club.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And even if we are full beyond belief, we will eat those last 5 bites because we don't want some kid in China to go hungry, right?
Right.
Yeah. And my parents would say that, and it never occurred to me that I am not affecting their food of the children. For us, it was Africa, children in Africa. That there's no way me eating that was helping the children in Africa.
It only makes this psychological distress in our minds of now we are trained to, even when we're stuffed, we're like, there's 5 bites left. There's 5 bites left. Let's just get it down. But when we finish a meal, we should not feel like we can't move. We shouldn't feel stuffed. We should feel satisfied and like we still have energy. We shouldn't feel sluggish after we eat. You know, I think especially as Western diets, a lot of Western diets are fatty, sugary, high in simple carbs, which inherently makes us feel sluggish afterwards. But, you know, by going back to a previous point, by thinking about where our food comes from and the quality of our food, be more prone to eat plant-based, lighter meals, which in turn won't make us feel so sluggish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these kind of all work hand in hand together, these mindful eating practices. And this is last one, but try eating in silence. You know, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but when we turn off some senses, other senses get enhanced. So, you know, that and taking, you know, in regards to taking gratitude before your meal, I'm sure many do this, but, you know, say a prayer before the meal. I'm sure many do this already, but I think it really allows us to say to ourselves, we are sitting down and we are eating right now. You know, it kind of establishes this boundary of eating and doing other multitasking events. So I'm sure.
If I sit down and eat my dinner in silence, Clyde's going to think I'm mad at him.
Maybe beforehand you can just tell him, I'm just warning you, Clyde, I am not angry. I love you sincerely, and I want to test this out.
Okay.
So, I can see that. I think I've done the same thing.
I'm not going to say to him, Weston told me not to talk to you at dinner.
No,
I'm not
definitely
gonna
don't say
do
that, Carol. Don't say that. I don't want to get a call from Clyde.
Oh,
But yeah, so that's kind of the tips I have to share with you today and the recipes.
Great.
well, thank you very much. This has been very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in and for staying for so long. I know it kind of went over, but it was a lot to discuss, a lot more than I thought it would be, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
You did a good job.
Good stuff.
Oh,
Thanks, Weston.
thank you, Carol. Thank you, Patricia.
Take
And
care.
I will see you next Wednesday if you're able to. If not, well, these are all recorded, so most of you will join
What's
us.
thinking next Wednesday? Do you know yet?
I do not know yet. No, I've kind of just taken it week by week.
Okay.
So,
All right. Sounds good.
all right. We'll see you, Carol. See you, Patricia. See you
Bye-bye.
later.
Bye-bye.